Peter, welcome back. Good to see you again.
I know, and look, I see you have a another one in the repertoire of shirts
Yes.
that are
Yes.
astounding. I mean, I always I like this color. This is a good one.
Astounding. That's a yeah, I got some
It's
pink, got
astounding.
some green, got some gold. It's
The coloring works for you. I think
yeah,
it's
thank
very
you.
spring-like. It's very appropriate given where we are in the calendar year.
It is finally feeling like spring, so I figured, bust out the spring colors. No more blues. I want some bright colors.
I'm with you,
Um,
man. I of course did not do that, as I never do, but hey.
so it's ironic that I said no more blues because we're going to talk about what it's like when you get the blues with your AI project today, right?
Oh yes, this one's a nice little topic that we've got coming up.
Yeah.
The we'll call it "How Not to Do Stupid Things." No, actually not that. When when to kill an AI project.
Know when to walk away, as Kenny
Yes, yeah.
Rogers would have said.
I was
You
gonna
got to
say
know when to
that's a
walk
song
away.
over there. Actually, they should cue up a song in the background when they edit this.
I don't know why we didn't think of writing our own lyrics to that song. It could have been
You,
about, you know, knowing when to walk away from your AI project.
you give me 5 minutes, I'm sure I can come with some lyrics if you even
Yeah.
need that much time.
So, but hey, this is on a slightly serious note. This is something we've talked
Hmm.
about before, and that is
Yeah,
there is a there's a really unnecessary and ultimately kind of harmful stigma about stopping an AI project. And like we've always said, a really good AI project is often pushing some boundary somewhere, and you're never
right.
guaranteed of success. So, I think you said this once on one of our podcasts just a few weeks ago, Peter, which is as long as you learn something from it, it's never really a failure.
Right. Well, given especially where the technology is, and it's really in its infancy, though. Yeah, a big part of starting a project, and we could talk about POCs later if we want to interject that, but a big part is learning, especially in the beginning. But I
Yeah,
think again, the whole point of this is like, what point do you kill it? What point do you make a decision to, fish or cut bait or walk away, or when do you say, hey, enough is enough, no more, let's move on.
right.
It's there are some criteria you probably should follow, don't you think?
Absolutely. The sunk cost fallacy is alive and well in AI projects as it is in most other areas of human endeavor, right?
Yeah, I never understand why people can't walk away from things. It just baffles me sometimes,
Yeah.
especially AI projects for some reason.
All right, so knowing when to walk away, put a spike in it, drive a nail through it, blow it up, or
Hmm.
whatever you want to say, is a good skill to have for AI projects, right?
Absolutely. I mean, look, we can say it's generally a good idea to have for most projects, but I think especially AI projects, and the
Yeah.
reason for that is again, tech is new. We're still learning. We don't have hard and fast rules for a lot of what we're doing. We're still trying to figure some of this stuff out, and probably will be for a long time.
All right. Well,
But
I appreciate that you channeled your inner David Letterman and created a top 10 list of reasons to
I
walk
did.
away from an AI project. So,
I
um,
did.
yeah,
Let's start with number one on the list of Peter and David's top 10 lists
I
of
feel like
when
I
to
should
kill
do
an
a
AI
drum roll
project.
here. Drum roll,
I
please.
think we should have them add that in the background.
All right. Maybe our producer will do us a solid and like throw in some special effects for us.
I'm
So,
all for that, man. I'm all for that. Maybe we'll head of David Letterman superimposed on both of us.
hey, someone once told me I looked like the music guy on the Letterman show. I forgot his name
Oh,
now.
Paul, I forget his name. Paul
Paul
something or other.
Schaefer.
Yes,
Yeah.
Paul Schaefer.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you can't do this to me in the middle. 5:30 at night. You can't do this to me when I've been up since like 4 o'clock in the morning.
All right. Well, number
All
one
right,
on our list is okay, read it out, Peter. What's number one on our list?
no clear business value.
Yeah.
Now, that seems obvious to most people, but for some reason, I feel like that rule is often not followed.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people get excited about what they're doing with AI projects, and it almost leads to like an unnatural desire to just keep pushing the project forward, even when you've lost track of business value or reached the conclusion that it isn't really there. But,
If it even had business value at all in the beginning, or it just, I don't know, people got overwhelmed with, I don't know, they felt like they had to do something and they did something and that something really was nothing. And, they spent all this
yeah,
time and money on building something that nobody really wanted because nobody understood the business value of the business. And now a project that spent, I don't know, maybe a couple $100,000 on.
Yeah.
So like, what am I really doing over here?
Well, I think to be honest, this is a natural part of some AI projects, right? You don't always know exactly what level of accuracy or precision or recall you're going to achieve when you
Right,
start developing a model. And so you could start and you could put a lot of time into it only to get so close to where you want to be and just realize you can't get the level of performance out of an AI model, for
right,
example, that you need to. And
right, right.
that's a hard one because, by the time you get to that realization, you may have been at it for quite a while and you may have built 70 or 80% of a solution.
No, I think your point is totally valid. And you and I have been dealing with analytics for over a decade. And look, there are certainly models where the data is not available, the data is not good enough, or whatever it may be. And you're trying to build something, and you get to a conclusion at some point that you're not getting any real business value out of this.
Right,
And why am I doing this? In fact, it might be net negative, and it's best
right.
just to drop it. That's I think one
Yeah,
angle. The other angle is, and you and I have seen this quite a bit, is there's certainly just not enough business knowledge by the people that are coming up with the projects, and they're building what they think the business will want without validating that with the business. And
yeah,
hence they build something that the business goes, I will never use that. That doesn't even work into my workflow. It makes no sense, and it's just not relevant to how we operate. And then you have
right.
this thing here that's of zero value.
Now, I'm going to offer up a big but here. And the big but is be sure that you really are not going to get the business value before you walk away. Because the other thing I have seen happen many times is projects that inch along and they get incremental increases in performance. And then all of a sudden, someone figures out the right thing to change, and you get this like leap ahead in performance. So,
Right.
if you still have if you can try a new model, if you can try a different approach, if you can switch up the data, yes, you might want to keep going and just test some of these big alternatives. But if you're stuck, if you're just inching along and you're convinced you've
Right.
got nothing left to try, walk away. Don't 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 keep trying it.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Hey, look, at some point you have to fish or cut bait, and you can look the budgets. I don't know of any company that has an unlimited budget and an unlimited amount of time, and at some point you have to make a decision. And it is, I do feel like projects are like government programs. Once they're started, they rarely stop. And it's
Yeah.
something and it's just interesting. The psychology is nobody wants to claim failure because they feel like that's a ding on their reputation. So they're highly reluctant, and it really shouldn't be the case.
Oh, come on.
Failure
I've
is not a
failed so
bad
many
thing.
times. I've failed so many times in my life. I'm happy to claim failure. Uh,
Honestly, those that don't claim failure, I kind of have to look suspiciously. Like, really, seriously, you've never failed? That's we all know that's a crock. You have
right.
failed,
You're either too
and
stubborn or
just
you're not telling the truth. Um,
exactly,
okay.
exactly.
Well, let's
But
let's go on. Should we go on to number two on our list?
yes, let's go on to number two.
Number
So number
two.
two, misalignment with core strategy, core business strategy, and I think this is an important one
Oh yeah,
because now we'll go back to everything that you and I said. And I still firmly believe this. AI should not be dropped into technology's lap because it
100%.
will invariably not align with core business strategy.
Yep, yep, 100%. And I see this all the time. This might be the most frequent sin that I see people committing, which is they're chasing they're chasing opportunities that someone has identified as, hey, this would be a great use case for AI, but it's
Right.
an opportunistic approach rather than a strategic approach. And the problem is doing AI costs money. Everything a company does costs money, right? But doing AI can cost a lot of money. And if you're going to make an investment, you better be investing in something that is core to the business, not just something that someone said, wow, that would be cool to apply AI to.
Yeah. No, I don't. I don't. Maybe I don't. Maybe you've seen this or not, but I'm always kind of a little confused. I feel like when you say AI, people get the vapors. They kind of all of a sudden have to. I don't know. They get excited. I have to come up with something, and they never really
It's a
give.
very Victorian term.
Yeah, it is a very Victorian. I just feel it's a very appropriate in this conversation, or pro, how we want to say it. It's appropriate.
Okay.
But I'm always baffled. They seem to check their brains, and all of a sudden they start doing stupid things. And I don't really kind of understand the logic. It's like, why not ask some questions first and avoid a lot of aggravation and
Right.
avoid spending a lot of money on something you know is not going to have any value. So I don't know. I just people seem to check a major portion of the decision making component of their brain when they do some of these things.
I think people get excited and they want to do it, and that rationality walks out the door sometimes when you talk about this because, I would say it is true that AI is supremely powerful, but it is not true that applying AI to everything is a good idea. And yet, here we
Right.
are. Right.
And here we are today telling you, when to kill an AI project.
Right.
Um, and
So
it's a hard thing to do.
So you said, I mean, to sort of wrap up this point on the list, you said that you shouldn't just drop AI into a technology organization and say, go find some stuff to do. So how do you make it aligned with core strategy? What's your shortcut here?
Well, Peter can go off and speak about this. It's his favorite topic for hours. But no, I don't think dropping it into IT people is it really the answer because they very often don't have a deep understanding or appreciation of how the business operates. They become, for most organizations, a cost center and very often buried, if not one, at least very often two and sometimes three layers below the CEO, which I think is just the wrong way to do this.
Right.
They have to be deeply closely aligned to the business. The business has to be involved in the decision making, and I mean deeply involved in decision making for these tools. And it very often is not the case. And I don't mean one or two designated people. There have to be designated business people that are part of the process, come up with use cases, have to be educated. There's a lot that has to go into it. Maybe you have I don't know, a chief strategy officer at the firm, or um, I've always, thought that CIO should be a business partner with the firm, given how technology drives organizations and even AI more so than anything. Maybe you have a chief AI officer. I don't know what the answer is. Every
Right.
company is different. But you can't just hand it off and say, go do stuff. That does not work. And it seems like what most
Agreed.
CEOs and boards have done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a constant challenge for people. And I feel like I need one of those like voiceovers now, because the voiceover would say, having gotten to 20% of the way through the list, Peter Memon has begun referring to himself in the third person. So, anyway, let's move on to number three. Uh,
I think we should keep doing these later at night because you and I get tired and we get sillier. So
yeah, there we go.
anyway,
Number three. Number three could refer to a lot of things. It says persistent
yes.
underperformance, but I don't think you're referring to everything. I think you're talking about underperformance of your AI. Let's talk about that one. What does persistent underperformance mean?
It means, and I haven't been we haven't been in a situation where I know in other companies where they've developed, for instance, a chatbot in the firm, and it is consistently underperforming because it's
Yep.
always given incorrect answers, even though it's been supposedly configured and trained with all the latest documentation and RAG has been set up, but for whatever reason, it wasn't configured right.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't chunked right. God, who knows what they did wrong? But you ask it a question, and the answer it gives you is the complete opposite of the one that you should be getting. And it does this, half the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's a slippery slope for a lot of organizations because I find like, especially if you're doing more traditional AI models, they're doing like, prediction, for example, you're predicting a
Right.
future price of an asset. Um, unless you understand what that threshold, that baseline performance of humans is, how do you
Mhm.
even know you're underperforming, right? I see all
Right.
the time people are like, well, it's getting it right 87% of the time, and 87% right could be amazing or it could be
Oh,
woefully bad, and you don't
right.
know until you understand like what's the baseline, what's the goal here. So I think a
Right.
lot of people don't even know how to measure performance in a meaningful way.
No, I think you're 100% correct. And, the traditional ways of measuring performance and traditional analytical models, it helps, it gets you part of the way there. But you're right. And you brought this up multiple times, with some of your examples of how you're just measuring the wrong thing or you don't have the right numbers. And while it might appear good,
Yeah.
in reality, it is absolutely horrible. So
Right.
part of this to me is it's knowing what to measure. It's not just underperform. It's a broad term, obviously, but knowing what to measure, knowing where you are today, seeing if it improves your situation, because it doesn't improve what you're doing. There's no sense in
Right.
deploying something that's going to cost you a ton of money. And you have to be able to at least measure where you are today. That's
So
incredibly important.
Really good point, and it implies something that we have talked about many times, and it still seems to be missing in a lot of implementations, which is if you're going to be measuring the performance of a model once you release it, that means that you actually have some concept of AI operations or ML operations, right? That
Yes.
you
Yep. Yep.
have a team of people who is monitoring it, who is continuously measuring it, who's observing its real world impacts, etc. You simply must not deploy AI without having the ability to monitor how it's behaving over time in the real world. Full stop.
Right. No, you're
Fight
100% correct.
fight me on that, anybody? No.
And you're 100% correct. And that's exactly the case.
Yeah.
You have to do this the right way. It's not just, and again, I think many companies will throw these things over the fence and expect magic to occur. And it might have magic for a week or two. And then, but once they're in production, they degrade or they change, or, the external data, something changes, and all of a sudden they start, the output starts degrading very rapidly because
All
they
right,
don't have
so
the.
any of you out there who are deploying AI solutions and not monitoring them, when AI starts killing off humans and taking over the world, I will blame you for this. Okay. I guess that's a sign that it's time to go on to number 4 on the list.
Yes, indeed
Yeah.
it is.
Uh, Number 4
So
is one that keeps me up at night all the time.
yes, this is your
Unmanageable
favorite.
data problems. Like, oh
I don't know what
yeah.
those are. What are data problems? I never heard of data problems. Those things
Ooh.
never occur.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have time here to get me on a roll talking about all the different ways that data problems can occur, but I think this is probably one of the most common points of failure for AI systems, and it can happen at any time. It can happen when you're training the model.
Right,
You may discover early on that you can't get sufficient quality out of your training data, or
right,
it can happen once you've launched it, and you might find that the data that you're presenting to the model to make a prediction or do inferencing on is degrading in quality and causing the model to not work. So you've got
right,
to, similar to model performance, you've got to be on top of this all the time. You've got to be monitoring your data quality. You've got to be
right.
monitoring not just the quality, but is it arriving on time? Is it granular enough? Is it timely enough? Does it still represent the real world, etc.?
Oh,
And
right, right, right.
there's a
And
constant problem that called data shift or data drift, which is where
mhm,
the shape and the structure and the say the distribution of values in your data changes over time and you don't realize
right,
it. And then your model is doing weird things because it's not getting the appetite, or it's not being fed the food to which it has become accustomed, and you're
right,
throwing off
right.
its performance. Um,
Right. And you and I talk about this often. I mean, and there, like you said, there's a whole bunch of metrics around data and measuring data. But most firms that we've spoken to, I'd say almost, without certainty, almost 100% of the firms don't have data management programs in place at
right.
all. They don't
So
measure their data. They don't measure the metrics behind it. They do none of what you just rattled off.
no, they don't. And I have seen quite a few projects that are, humming along in terms of they set up infrastructure, they're writing code, they're developing models, but they aren't getting the right data. And they say, well, we know it works if we could just get the right data, right? Well, the point is,
Yeah,
if you can't get the right data, it doesn't work. It, it,
it's
it
never going to
never
work.
will work, right? So
Right.
if you get to the point where you can't get the data or you can't fix the issues in the data, it doesn't matter how good your technology is. It doesn't matter how bright and
Right.
innovative you are. If you can't get the data, it will not work. And if you can't surmount those data problems, time to walk away.
Kill the project. And this is just a slight little segue, maybe you come back around. This is where POCs really come in handy and try to find some
Yeah.
of this up front before you embark on a project and you spend months and man months and doing all this work and realizing you can never get the data in a way that you needed to keep the model, get the
Yeah.
model to the level. And I don't know, this is one of these things, too much enthusiasm. They unleash the forces and it's hard to pull it back. And I again don't know why people don't like to say no and don't want to pull back and don't want to kill things when they clearly should be
Yeah.
either never been born. I mean, they should just never get off the ground, or they should be killed.
Totally true. And it's funny because I have seen POCs that are done with made up data, which is a very risky thing to
Oh,
do because,
yeah,
of course your data is right when you make it up. Like,
Yeah, yeah, I don't. Yeah, that one always gets me too. It's like, yeah, let me go synthesize. Let me get some synthetic data here, and yeah, wow, I get these fantastic results. Problem is, synthetic data very often looks like real data, and next thing you know, you
right.
put the real pipeline on, and all of a sudden things go sideways, and your nice little application that was going to create millions of dollars is now losing you millions of dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. Good segue to numero cinco on our list. Uh, Escalating costs with no progress. Um,
Yes. Yep. Yep.
have you seen this
Uh,
happen?
oh, yeah. Yeah. Um, Yeah, we've seen this one. Costs go through the roof for any number of different reasons. All of a sudden, you either start ascertaining that it's much more costly to shape the data, might be a reason,
Yep.
or all of a sudden you're not realizing that these big, wonderful prompts that you come up with are costing you a tiny fortune.
Yeah.
Um, and yet you've gotten nowhere near a production environment. You're still in a test environment, and your costs are just going through the roof. And if we deploy this, it's going to be put the company out of business.
Yeah, I find so many times people are excited and justifiably proud maybe of what they've built, and they don't monitor the costs and they don't have any idea that, as it's getting more usage, suddenly the costs become unsustainable. I was talking to someone a couple of months ago where they had deployed an AI powered chatbot on their website to help customers make purchasing
Right,
decisions, and
right.
they had built it with an off the shelf, fairly expensive model, but it did what they wanted it to do and they were happy. Only when it was a runaway success and they were having many thousands of interchanges per day did they
I realize.
realize that the average cost per customer conversation was $7 or $8, right? But
Oh,
like in the market they were in, adding $7 or $8 to not even to converted customers, to all of your prospects, to your
oh,
cost of getting a prospect was unsustainable. And
right.
they eventually reluctantly had to take it down because it
Turn it
just,
off.
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
because if you had like a 20% conversion rate, right? Like suddenly you're spending $40 for every lead. That's
right.
not a good investment in their business.
It's amazing to me, and again, I guess enthusiasm trumps rationality very often for a lot of people when it comes to this. But so many of the problems that we've discussed that would kill a project, so much of this to me is just so preventable. And I'm not everything preventable. A lot of this is so preventable. It's just asking yourself the right questions at the beginning, doing a healthy POC, getting the results, and narrowing down the risk and risk mitigation. And you don't have to go down this path where you're making some of these decisions if you just use a lot of intelligence and proper engineering up front, and you'll
I,
not
I
get
agree.
here.
I agree, but I agree up to a point. And the point at which I would diverge a little bit is some of the stuff isn't always going to be preventable, and
Yes.
there's no shame in having these things happen. The
No.
shame is in dragging your feet and not reacting and not acknowledging reality when they do happen.
I
Right.
think it is, I know, I'm just going to agree with you. You're absolutely correct. I mean, yes, what I said, you're right. You can prevent a lot. You're never going to end it. There's always going to be projects that should have gotten canceled halfway through and save a lot of money. But I think
Yeah.
it's very much human nature. It's corporate politics that most individuals are very, very, very reluctant to go to their managers and say, we need to kill this beast because it's going to cost us too much money, because nobody wants to look them in the face and say this project that they've actually talked to everybody about and how it was going to basically cure cancer, all of a sudden they realize it can't even do anything. And nobody
Yeah.
wants to say that. They don't want to cost the company, but not realizing that it's going to cost the company far more money and resources if they don't kill it.
So we've made it halfway through the list. Let's take a little side diversion because I just thought of something as you were saying that, Peter, and I want to get your take on this. We said at the top that if you have a project that you have to cancel, it's okay as long as you learn something. But what next? Okay, you learned something. How do you make that actually be a learning experience for the company instead of just your personal learning experience? Like, how do you share the knowledge so that other people don't fall into the same trap that you did?
You bring up a really good point, and I don't have a great answer for you on this one because you basically want to internalize knowledge from your projects across the board, and that's not easy. And I don't think organizations generally do that really well. They don't take the knowledge that they've gained from projects and share it really well. They just don't. I have not been in an organization, I don't, maybe you haven't either, where when we learn from our mistakes, that the organization internalizes that and doesn't make it again. And
Yeah.
that to me is surprising.
I think that's 100% right. It's the hallmark of a real learning organization is that they have
Right.
some systemic way to do that, and I rarely see it. I did work
No.
with one company a few years ago that had what I sort of jokingly referred to as they had their own like sort of jargony name for it, but I refer to it as the Eminem session. It is the morbidity and mortality report session,
Right.
which is something borrowed from the medical profession, in which when there's a
Mm,
bad outcome up to and including morbidity, they the physicians involved in that patient case present in depth what happened, and they sort of stand up and face the music. And
right.
it's not done to humiliate them. It's done to
Right.
really probe what went wrong, what should everybody there take away from this and learn from this. And
Right.
at the risk of making people uncomfortable, I think we should be doing that every time we have any sort of a canceled project, but especially an AI project. We should stop and say,
Right.
all right, what did we learn? How do we capture that knowledge and write it down in a way that others can,
S-
benefit?
I couldn't agree with you more. You're absolutely correct. I think, you're right. And it's funny because I just finished a book by the guy that started Palantir, Alexander Karp, and the name of the book escapes me, but in the book he speaks about something called the five whys, and it's why, and it's like, why did this happen? You give an answer, that's great. Well, why did that happen? And you go deeper and deeper and deeper until you get to really is the root cause of the problem, and it might be something completely unrelated to actual cause the project to fail. What they
Yeah,
do is, and I found this absolutely fascinating and very highly relevant, and it actually comes out of Toyota manufacturing. It was an engineer that came up with the idea back in, I want to say, in the 70s, and it's since then been internalized into manufacturing. You see how Japanese manufacturers have always used it in the development of vehicles and cars. It was always, and it goes back to Deming as well, continuous improvement. But
yeah.
for this five why process, they really go through and they ask those questions, and it's never meant to be targeted at an individual, but okay, things went sideways. Why'd they go sideways? Let's get to the root cause and figure it out. Let's document it. Let's
Yeah.
internalize it. Let's share that information. And they've done thousands of these sessions, which they've documented. And
I
same
love
with
I
was
I love that, and I love that you said root cause because I have seen through, through working in my life on thousands of data quality issues, humans are terrible without some training and some real guidance to do it. Humans are terrible at confusing proximate cause with root cause. And
yes,
generally, as soon as you find a cause, maybe a proximate cause, you're so happy to have found a cause that you're just like, okay, we got it, we're moving on.
right,
And people are very reluctant, and it requires some discipline and some training to say, okay, is that actually the root
100%.
cause, or did something cause that to occur, which was caused by something else, which,
Right.
et cetera, until you get to the real root cause.
And very often the root cause is completely different than the actual is
Oh,
very different than what you thought the first level cause was, the proximate cause. But
yeah,
like you said, that training, that knowledge, that I don't know, self-awareness is not in most organizations. And I think with AI projects being as transformational as they can be, you kind of have to have some of that there. You have to be able to ask these questions and not get
right.
offended when somebody says, it's not that you screwed up, Peter, you made a mistake. It's we all make mistakes. That should be the norm. We accept we make mistakes, even stupid mistakes and things that are sometimes self-evident. But we need to resolve. We need to ask the questions until we get to the right answer. Like, why did we even get this far at all when we shouldn't even have gone here? Like, what can we change in our processes to avoid this in the future and save us money? There's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing. That's a
No,
healthy thing.
no, it all goes back to our premise at the top, which is killing a project is not always a bad decision, and sometimes it's the right thing, and you can learn from it and benefit from it, and it'll help you in the long run. So, totally
Right.
agree with you. All
Right.
right, well, let's
Right.
go back to our regularly scheduled list. I think we're at number 6, which is
We
near
are.
and dear to my heart:
Yes.
regulatory
This
and
is
ethical red flags.
this is your domain. I will leave this one up to
Yeah.
you. And
Well,
then
oh boy, and look, this is such a big problem space. to say regulatory and ethical, there is so much that could go wrong. So, look, I think, the first point I would make is you need to, for all AI projects, you need to consciously look for what are the regulatory concerns? What are the legal concerns? Are there intellectual property considerations, copyright
Right.
considerations, data privacy and personal privacy considerations? You need to be looking out for those. You need to know what the risks are before you ever start the project.
Right.
And then you need to monitor those as you go. And you may run into problems where you just aren't going to be able to overcome them. The ones that are sneakier to me are the ethical red flags, the
Yes.
responsible AI, the safety ethics, and these are very, very insidious because there's no arbitrary
There.
easy way of determining where is the ethical boundary, right? Every organization has to
Right.
decide for itself where is the ethical boundary that they're going to draw. But what is clear is once you draw that boundary, you've got to be very careful not to step over it because the downside of doing so is massive. I
Yes.
was
Yes. Yeah.
sitting
It's
in a
a.
room. Yeah, I tell people this sometimes. It has stuck with me for now. It's been 6 or 7 years, I think. I was sitting in a meeting room high up above Manhattan with a world famous CEO who said to his team that day, "Look, folks, I'm not sure if all of you understand this, but the damage to our company that could arise from a ethical misstep and the reputational damage could cost us far more in terms of our stock price and enterprise value than any data breach or any, you know, fairly significant regulatory fine." Like, if you throw
Right.
away your reputation, if you're in the public sector, if you're a private company selling to the public, like, you lose your reputation, you lose customer trust, and you might as well just
You.
close up shop and go
Well,
home.
you know as well as I do, getting that back once you've destroyed it is virtually not that it's impossible. It's really difficult, and many times you can't get it back, depending on how serious your ethical
Yeah,
violation. But the trouble with this whole trouble, I guess, and I think you alluded to it a little bit. It's very subjective in nature, and a lot of these things are highly subjective. And what you and I think are legitimate and okay, somebody else might not. And sometimes it's hard to gauge where that boundary lies. And we've
yeah,
seen this repeatedly, especially in finance. This crops up all the time, and the boundaries and what might seem a rational, objective thing to do, it doesn't make sense, and it might cause all sorts of other issues. And you might
yeah,
cross that line and not even realize you're crossing that line. And this is where this gets really, really, really fuzzy and very
yeah.
hard, very often to figure out. It's not a black and white situation at all.
Not at all. And we could do and we should do a whole episode on AI ethics and safety. But what I will say
Yes.
is there are guidelines out there. There are a lot of different organizations that will help you, you know, set up frameworks to understand the
Right.
risks, to understand the potential harms that you may cause. But if you wait until you have a use case and just say, I'll know it when something bad happens, you're doing it wrong, right? You need to consciously set
Right.
guidelines up front. You need to say, what are our principles? What are our core principles that we are going to hold
Right.
ourselves to? And then you need to evaluate all of your AI projects through the lens of each of those core principles to say, is there any scenario, any danger here that I could violate this core principle? And if so, how do I mitigate that risk?
But you said something very important. And this is, I think, where a lot of companies go, what are your principles? And I don't, again, it's a lot of companies just not articulated. Maybe they think it's innate, it's this, but I think they don't, it's not articulated, it's not out there, and not everybody adheres to the same principles.
Yeah,
So, and these systems, given the power, are and can be so, they have impacts that other systems won't have. And
right.
that's why, having an ethics person at the beginning of a project, not every project needs this clearly, but if you have a customer facing system, yeah, you might want to have ethics and compliance people at the very beginning of this process to say, hey, what line do we not want to cross with this?
Yeah, 100%. All right. Should we go on to lucky number 7?
Let's do it.
I don't think you're
Yeah, and
lucky if you have this problem, but
I think you're grossly unlucky if you have this problem, but I think you and I have seen this many times.
yeah. Yep. Yep.
And look, this like could manifest itself in a lot of different ways, and it's stakeholder and executive doubt.
Yeah.
Um, that's the doom loop, man. You get this problem, you just might want to kill it right then and there.
Yeah.
Not even start.
I mean, that's it. This is on its best day. This is hard stuff, and it's not always going to be a straight line from point A to point B. You're going to have to make some diversions and figure stuff out, and that requires patience and support from your executive sponsors. If you don't have that, if they are thinking you get one shot and you have to do it perfectly the first time, whew, brush up your resume.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're spot on. But I think it's funny. I think, this is where I think technologies fail miserably sometimes. Relationship management is absolutely critical. You have to
Yeah,
be good at managing your stakeholders, and they have to have trust in you. Look, at the end of the day, they're the ones that are responsible for, potentially allocating millions of dollars to you to build a project. They better have a little bit of faith in you.
yeah.
But if they lose faith in your ability to deliver projects, your days are numbered, and it's time to close up shop.
Yeah, and look, without, you don't want to go in and sort of hedge all your bets and plan to fail, but you do need to make sure that your
Right,
stakeholders understand the reality of these projects, understand that there is a degree of execution risk that comes with them, that there are a number
right.
of sort of unknowables that you will have to tackle, and sometimes you aren't going to get where you want to go the way you want to get there, and your sponsors have to understand that going in.
And I think you need to be honest. Like I've always, whenever I managed projects my entire life, especially complex projects, that had tons of risks associated with them, and a lot of times these were things that were not knowable when we were doing the design, and sometimes, very often, we didn't figure it out until we were trying to deploy. You have to have one. You have the faith. You have to just be transparent to your users. I find that most people are generally
Right,
understanding if you
right.
just explain to them why there are issues, why you got where you got, like where the issues lie, and just kind of clear about it. But you need that trust. You need that. You can't just
Yeah.
go off. Oh, you can't be vague about this stuff. I'm always honesty is certainly honesty and clarity and education is goes a long way.
Yeah, if you don't, I think you just said trust. If you don't enjoy the trust of your internal clients, of your sponsors, it's time to re-examine a lot about the way that your project is run and the way that you've related to them. Because if you don't enjoy that trust, you won't get very far in this arena.
I'll go further than that. Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. And if you don't enjoy the trust of your clients, you might want to put your resume together because regaining that is going to be incredibly difficult.
Yeah. All right,
So,
moving on to number 8. Better
uh,
alternatives emerge. Oh, this one hits hard, man. I I'm I'm
yeah.
like shaking as I read that one because I've seen this way too many times. Um,
Uh, Yeah, and as well as I do, there are a lot of technologists out there who want to buttress their resumes by doing projects when, the
oh yeah.
simple answer might be go get a pen and paper. But instead they got to design a big system for it instead.
Yep.
Um,
Sorry, I lived through this a few years ago. One in particular that really blows me away because it was a project, and the team of very, very talented researchers were building
right,
from scratch AI models, and they'd been working on this problem for a long time, and they were still quite a ways off the performance target where the
right,
system was going to perform better than highly trained humans, and we just weren't getting where we wanted to be, and meanwhile, some open source models had come onto the market. This is the early days of like
right.
TensorFlow models and things.
Yep.
And we suggested several times to the team they might want to look at these TensorFlow models, and they were just so resistant to do it. And after spending millions of dollars and quite a bit of time, they did finally decide,
Look
okay,
at
we'll kick
the
the tires on TensorFlow. And they immediately went
right,
from like mid 80s to mid 90% accuracy. I mean,
right,
just it was a massive lift.
right.
And they would have saved a lot of money if they had just done it earlier. So I think,
You, you know, the common theme I think throughout all of this is ask a lot of questions all the time and be willing to accept an answer that is not the one that you want. And
yeah,
I feel like that's not often the case. Um,
yeah,
human nature seems to be the biggest impediment often to deploying these systems. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
technology obviously is an impediment, but human nature seems to be the biggest impediment, and not having
totally.
don't say processes or controls in place, but it's just people have their own agendas and they cause a lot of these problems.
Oh, we are our own worst enemies sometimes. Now, I do want
Yes.
to, as we talk about this idea of like, ignoring the better alternatives that emerge, I will offer a note of caution on that, which is we've all seen projects that go into a
Yes.
doom cycle because they are constantly changing their underlying technology. Every time
Yes.
a new version of something comes out, they want to try that one. And look,
Yep.
in the space of generative AI right now, in 2025 in Gen AI, if you're
Mhm.
chasing the latest shiny object, you will never get any work done because there is a new
Oh,
shiny object every day.
oh, my, yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you have to. I'm a big fan of making a decision, sticking with the decision, unless it's your overwhelming amount of evidence as you get a switch. When it comes to technology and engineering, at least.
Yeah, and when you make that
But you're
switch, I
right.
mean, as you said, when a simpler, cheaper, more effective technology comes out, don't hesitate to pivot. But the point is, you need to know that there is a real reason to do that it is
Right.
cheaper, that it is better, that it is more reliable, or whatever. There needs to be
Right.
an actual evidentiary reason to do it, not just
Yes.
because it's the cool new thing and you want to use it.
Right. Right. Exactly. And then there needs to be some thought behind it, and that's, yeah, not always the case.
All right.
So on to number nine now. We're
Our
almost at the end
penultimate
of the.
reason. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a good one. Endless integration roadblocks. This is something that we have all well, until we all have encountered. But I think we've always hit this. We've come up against this problem many times.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
when
And integration in like you can have the best standalone model, but if you can't integrate it into your technology and into your business process,
right.
it doesn't matter. Like you'll have tissue rejection or some other form of like it just won't
I
work,
like that. I
right?
like Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And is look, as an engineer, the more touch points a system has, the level of complexity goes up towards integration. And the likelihood of things breaking is going to go up. So yeah, I mean, if you have constant roadblocks to putting a system into production and you can't get access to the right systems and like you said, or the process or whatever it may be,
Yeah.
and you find that the cost is just going through the roof to do this integration, which again I will argue that you should have a sense of that cost before you do all of this work. It's time to again pull the ripcord and say no more, we're done here.
Yeah, I think so. First of all, I really like your point about the number of integration points. As that grows, your implementation risk grows probably more than linearly, right? I don't know if it's actually
Yes,
exponential, but it's more than linear. Um,
100%.
and I think the other point you raised, which I want to amplify, is people all too often say, well, if I build the right solution, we'll figure out how to put it into the business process and how to integrate it with our technology
I
later,
know.
right? They're like, if it's good enough, someone will figure it out how to work it or how to integrate
Right.
it. Boy, you're leaving an awful lot to chance if you do that.
Yeah, I mean, I hope I don't recall. I mean, look, when I went to engineering school, I don't remember hope being a strategy. And you can't just say, "I hope I can figure this out when I get it into here."
Yeah,
You need to kind of, you should be thoughtful about it. So, and I think there's something, I think it applies here as well, that I learned a long time ago. Something about the human brain's capacity to juggle as many things as possible, juggle a finite number of things, touch
yeah,
points, and it's something called, I think it's called the cyclomatic complexity number. And usually, the average human can in short-term memory juggle between 5 and 7 things before things start getting punted. And I've always associated that with system design as well. That if you have too many touch points on the system, testing it and integrating things just becomes overwhelmingly complex very quickly. And you
yeah.
have to simplify to get things functioning and working with everything else. Um,
Well, the old a long time ago in software engineering, a lot of people would say like before you even design how your system works, think of it as a box, as a black box, and you
right.
start by figuring out do you know the goes-intas and goes-outas?
Yeah.
That's a phrase my grandfather used to use, right?
It's
Do
an
you know
engineering
what goes
phrase.
do you know what goes into the box here, and do you know what goes out of the box over there? Um, right? Where it's coming from and where it's going. Those are your integration points. And if you don't know those, doesn't matter. how fancy the machine inside the box is because you can't connect it to anything, and now it's just a desk
Right.
ornament, you know?
No, you're absolutely right. It's funny. We're talking about some of the stuff. And it's bringing back memories of my education for whatever reason. In educating, and I did a lot of system design and education with electronic systems, engineering systems, and those types of systems. And you had a very rigorous process around building systems that could scale. It was,
Right.
you knew what you had to do when you there all these classes you took on system design. I feel like that's, unless you're a path in education as you go through college,
Yeah.
is that path augmented with computer science classes, you kind of lose that software engineering or the engineering thought process, which is highly relevant. I know this is a bit of a tangent to nowhere, but I think that is very helpful because
Yeah.
to me, these are engineering principles. If you have too many touch points in the system, too many roadblocks, you're going to fail.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. No, I 100% agree with that. I think that's a huge risk. Should we bring it on home with number 10?
Let's bring it on home.
All right.
Opportunity
This one
cost.
I
I'm
love.
sorry, you
Yeah.
go. You go. You go. I know.
No,
So
go
did I.
ahead.
You go.
You
You go. No, no,
explain it.
you go ahead. You go. You go. So yeah, the opportunity cost becomes clear.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are just better opportunities or other options to spend money on rather than the cost of the system that you're working on.
Yep. It can be as simple as I would be better off spending my time on something else, right? There's a
Yep.
higher return activity I could be doing. And
Yes.
this comes full circle to the whole idea of sunk cost fallacy, right? Which we are
Yes.
terrible at. Which people will say, "Oh, but I've already spent X getting this project half done." Right?
Right.
So the question is, okay, would you rather have X spent and then get 10X from the other project, or would you be better off spending 2X to finish your first one instead
Right.
of putting it into the other project, right? Like,
Let me ask you a question. No. Let me ask you a question though. Have you ever seen this happen in reality?
oh, you're putting me on the spot. I mean, look, this is my dream company to work for would be a company that
The one that
is
we
not,
designed.
yes, because we're not afraid to cancel projects. We're not afraid to stop and say, this is
No.
stupid. We shouldn't do this anymore. It's not even a matter of being stupid. I said that flippantly. It's, hey, we have a finite amount of time and energy. We're spending on this. It'd be better spent on that. And how much we already spent on this is irrelevant, right? Like you need
Right.
to look at, we are where we are sitting here today. How should I spend my next 3 months? Finishing this or doing this other thing?
And you know what? And you bring up, yes, you're absolutely correct. I again go back to most organizations aren't designed to do this. And you have to readjust your thinking with projects and say, hey, you know what? You're right. This doesn't work. That there are better things to do. They're going to get a better return on their investment and going down the path of finishing this project, which, it's going to consume resources unknown, yada, yada. Um, but most orgs don't do this stuff.
No.
They're not set up for this. They're set up for a yearly budget. They're not set up to think about what they're doing all the time and constantly readjust and rethink and question and question and question. And consequently you get all these failed projects that just don't deliver on what they were supposed to do.
And humans being humans, right? Like if we do this, there's also a big risk that people overdo it, which is they, switch all the time. Uh, and that's
Right,
obviously also incredibly distracting and disruptive. You don't want to
right,
start a project and every week you pull your team off and say, okay, now work on something different because nothing ever gets done. So there is a balancing
right,
act. Like you have to get stuff done, but
right, right.
don't be
You're
afraid
absolutely right.
to ask the hard question, which is, would I rather
No,
finish this project or start this other one? And when I
I
say
know. I think
rather, I mean empirically what would be better for the company, not my personal preferences, just to be clear.
right, right. No, I think you're 110% correct. And again, human nature is I do something, I want to finish it. Most people they want to learn from it. They don't care if it gets the value they thought it was going to get. And yeah, look, we've articulated a lot of reasons, I think, in the last hour or so to kill projects, valid projects. It's up to you ultimately, an organization to make a decision. Do you have it? Are you set up to make these types of decisions once things have started? And I
Right.
think you and I both, having worked at large enterprises and even places that weren't large, it's very hard to do these things. And I think
Yeah.
Yeah, you
You,
just don't see them do it.
this list also, in all seriousness, this also could have been turned into lyrics for a Paul Simon song instead of 50 ways to leave your lover. This could have been like, 10 ways
Yes.
to kill your AI project. So we've got a whole set of songs we could have written about this.
I
Um,
think it's your podcast just on song making.
I maybe the next episode should be entirely sung, a sung through
Yeah, yeah,
podcast.
no. We'll get no
Hey, if we
viewers.
do that,
None.
I am hiring a stunt double. Just let's
Yeah,
let's
I
be
was gonna
clear
say,
about this.
it's not coming from me. You do not want to hear me sing.
Yeah.
I don't care.
I'll
If you're
play the
deaf, great.
guitar and you can sing. How's that?
You can play. Nah, you're on your own there. I am
All
not
right.
doing that.
I'm
Singing
not
is
sure
not my
anyone wants to hear me
forte.
play the guitar either. You definitely don't want to hear me
I
sing. You might not want to hear me play guitar.
I am sure you play the guitar far better than I sing. I can guarantee you that.
Uh, yeah.
I might, I might as well grow wings and fly away. It ain't happening.
All right. Well, here we are. We've burned up some time talking about 10 different indicators that it might be time to kill the AI project. And I think, look, if
Yes,
you take anything away from this, if you forget all 10 of those things, here's what I want you to take away. Don't be afraid to call time on a project. Pay attention to the reality of where you are. And if you have to call time, if you have to say I'm stopping the project, figure out how to turn that into a win by learning something from it. And don't just learn it for yourself, learn it for your organization. Be
right.
open. Share with people what happened. How did you reach the point you reached? How did you make the decision you made? What drove that decision? And make that a public study in how to responsibly manage projects and do better, because then you've
Right.
turned a loss into a win.
Into a win. And yes, I completely agree with you. And my only caveat is most orgs are not set up for that.
Yeah, you may turn the loss into a win and still, be blamed for it. And if that's the case, well, that's because your organization isn't as smart as you are.
And I'll say one final thing and then I'll stop talking. Um, I think, the transformational nature of artificial intelligence on an organization, on its culture, on its processes, on how it faces, their customers and virtually every other aspect, HR, you name it, marketing, it kind of is going to run roughshod throughout the entire organization. You really need to have that insight into your org. You need to be able to ask those deep questions. And if you can't, I think your days are numbered.
Yeah, I think you and I've been parts of all sorts of different organizations, and the ones that don't reward truth and the courage to figure out what's really going on aren't very fun places to work for most people, I think. Um,
Mm.
okay.
No, it's horrible. It's horrible. We've been through it. We know.
All right. Well,
On
it's
that note,
it's yeah. On that note, I will see you next week, Peter, for Call Me Data,
yes,
the next installment. I'll see if I
yes.
can scare up another Aloha shirt to
I, I,
liven up the party a little bit.
I expect a little wash,
I feel
David.
like this one I'm almost camouflaged into my office here. It's like I'm
It is
blending in with
blending
the
a little bit.
background,
Yeah, it is.
with the
It is
plants
definitely
in the
blending.
background and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely is blending a little bit. You have the blurry background, so it even more kind of
Yeah.
fits in a little bit. It's like it definitely looks like it's all blended together. So, but
Right.
that works. I think maybe one day I'll show up in a Aloha shirt. I'll surprise everybody.
We'll do like a little role reversal.
Yeah, why not? Let's do it. Anyway, dude, another great conversation as always. I look
Yeah,
forward to next week's
thank you everyone for
conversation.
joining us. It's hopefully this has been useful, and we'll see you in a week.
Have a good one. Have a good night,
All right.
everybody.
Take care. Bye everyone.
Bye now.